So some people smile at you, they talk to you, they even support you, but deep down they actually don't like you at all.
Yeah, it's a tough thing to realize.
Right. The truth is not all hate is loud. Some of it is silent and it's hidden behind this like fake kindness. And honestly, most people never even see it.
Exactly. I mean, evolutionarily, we're kind of wired to just take social cues at face value. Like a smile means you're safe,
Yeah, or a nod means they agree with you.
right? Our primitive brains really rely on those shortcuts to just navigate the tribe. But human social dynamics are way more layered than those basic cues suggest. And the undercurrents are often completely at odds with the surface behavior.
Which is exactly why we are doing this deep dive today. We are exploring the anatomy of silent resentment. Like, we really want to figure out why people secretly pull away and how to decode whether that sudden chilly distance is a reflection of their insecurities or maybe a result of your own unconscious blind spots. So, okay, let's unpack this.
Well, to start untangling this, we really have to look at the psychological friction that happens when you begin to outgrow your environment.
Oh, that makes sense.
Because, when we sense someone pulling away or harboring this silent resentment, our immediate panicked reaction is usually to internalize it.
Oh, absolutely. You start agonizingly replaying conversations, wondering what you did wrong.
Right, exactly. But when we analyze the sociology of group dynamics, we find that resentment directed at you frequently has absolutely nothing to do with your behavior. It has everything to do with what your very existence represents to that other person.
Wow. Okay, that reframes the entire feeling of being rejected.
It really does.
Because we're talking about those times when you are actually doing everything right. You know, you're growing, you're getting healthier, maybe you're building a new skill.
Or setting a new goal.
Exactly. But instead of the high fives and support you'd expect from your circle, you just get this weird, icy detachment. There was an observation in the sources we looked at that really hit the nail on the head. It said, when you improve your life, you are inadvertently holding up a mirror to others, reminding them of what they are not doing.
Yeah, and what's fascinating there is the underlying mechanism of that reaction. It involves a concept known as social categorization theory.
Okay, wait, what is that exactly?
So basically, the human brain is constantly, and I mean unconsciously, categorizing everyone around us to figure out where we stand in the social hierarchy.
Yeah.
It is just this relentless status calculation.
Oh, wow. So we're always kind of ranking ourselves.
Pretty much, yeah. So when you elevate your status, whether that's landing a promotion, adopting a healthier lifestyle, or, even just becoming more emotionally grounded, you disrupt the established equilibrium of your social ecosystem.
So you essentially break the unspoken contract of the group without even realizing you signed one in the first place?
Precisely. And this triggers a cascade effect that's explained by social exchange theory.
Okay, another theory. Break that down for me.
Sure. So this framework suggests that our relationships operate on this invisible internal ledger of equity. It's a balance of give and take, shared status and shared struggle.
Right. Misery loves company, right?
Exactly. So when your status suddenly rises, the other person's brain actually registers a deficit in that ledger. The relationship just no longer feels balanced to them. They feel diminished simply by your proximity.
That is wild.
And honestly, it is much easier for the human ego to project that uncomfortable dissatisfaction onto you than it is to confront their own stagnation.
So it's kind of like running a race where you don't even know you're competing, but the person running next to you is absolutely furious that you're pulling ahead.
Yes.
Like you're just enjoying the jog, but they are hyperventilating, convinced that you were deliberately trying to make them look slow.
That captures the dynamic perfectly. One-sided competition is a massive driver of silent resentment. Yeah, one of the behavioral analyses we reviewed noted this really stark reality. Competency makes insecure people feel lesser.
Wow, competency makes them feel lesser.
Yeah, they're exhausted from a race you didn't even know it started. But because it's entirely socially unacceptable to just walk up to a friend and say, I am angry at you because you are succeeding and I am not.
Right, nobody would ever actually say that.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
that anger has to mutate. It
Yep.
morphs into silent resentment. They will subconsciously seek out petty, unrelated reasons to dislike you, simply to justify the physiological discomfort they feel when you walk in the room.
That is so intense. And, it's not just the big successes that trigger this either.
No.
Because sometimes just showing up as your true unfiltered self is enough to set people off. Because if they can't beat you in that invisible status race, their next instinct is to try and control you.
Right, because control is an incredibly potent social currency.
Mm.
Most people feel a really profound sense of safety around individuals they can influence or predict or, manipulate.
Mm.
So when you stop seeking external validation, when you no longer require their approval to feel good about yourself, it creates this psychological vacuum.
Interesting. Because you aren't playing their game anymore.
Exactly. You become an unpredictable variable. And for people who rely on social control, unpredictability is just terrifying.
And nothing shatters a person's illusion of control quite like setting a firm boundary.
Oh, absolutely.
It's wild to see the data back this up, but saying no is undeniably one of the fastest ways to reveal someone's true intentions. Like the moment you stop being perpetually available, certain people will turn on you almost instantly.
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, boundary setting is fundamentally about shifting power dynamics.
Okay, say more about that.
You are actively removing toxic or demanding elements from your space. But the research points to a very specific linguistic trigger regarding how we set those boundaries, and that actually dictates the intensity of the backlash.
Yes. That linguistic shift blew my mind. The difference between saying I can't versus I don't.
It's fascinating, right?
It seems like such a minor semantic detail, but it changes the entire psychological impact of the boundary.
It really does. The phrasing actually alters the locus of control. So when you say, I can't take on this extra favor or I can't go out tonight, you are implying an external limitation.
Right, like something else is stopping me.
Yeah, you're signaling that you would like to comply, but some outside force is in the way. To a controlling person, that just sounds like an invitation to negotiate.
Oh, totally. They're like, well, let me fix that problem for you so you can do what I want.
Exactly. It leaves the door cracked open for them to problem solve your limitation or, deploy guilt.
But when you say, I don't work on weekends or I don't engage in gossip, it's a closed door.
Completely closed.
It shifts the boundary from an external excuse to an internal standard of your identity. It strips away their ability to manipulate the situation. And if a relationship was built entirely on their ability to manipulate your compliance, well, taking away that tool leaves them with nothing but resentment.
Furthermore, this ties into the broader threat of genuine authenticity. Navigating social spheres requires a certain level of performance for most people.
Like wearing a mask.
Right. They wear these carefully constructed masks as defense mechanisms. So when you show up authentically, operating without a mask, it acts as this harsh spotlight exposing the charade everyone else is putting on.
Which leads to a really painful side effect. We read this deeply poignant essay on social rejection that argued being misunderstood is actually significantly harder to endure than being overtly disliked.
Yeah, the psychological burden of being misunderstood is profound. Because dislike is a defined entity.
It has edges.
Exactly. You know exactly where the threat lies.
But when someone simply misunderstands you, especially if they are doing it willfully, they are reacting to a fictionalized version of you. They are judging you based on a narrative they constructed in their own head, usually just to protect their own ego, without ever actually asking you for the truth.
And the hardest part is that this often happens in total silence. They don't confront you. They just quietly conclude that you are arrogant or selfish or whatever label helps them feel better.
Leaving you entirely isolated.
It is the unavoidable short-term cost of stepping into your authenticity and enforcing boundaries. It naturally purges the individuals who are threatened by your genuine self, but the transitional period can feel intensely lonely while you wait for a healthier social circle to form.
Wait, let me challenge the premise of that transition, though.
Oh, go for it.
If setting healthy boundaries and showing up as our authentic selves actively causes social friction and loneliness, aren't we essentially being punished for having good mental health?
I mean, it certainly feels like a punishment in the acute phase. You are actively disrupting established patterns and systems, even highly dysfunctional social systems, always resist change.
Right, so there's bound to be friction.
The friction burn is real, but it is a necessary discomfort. The alternative is shrinking yourself, twisting yourself into knots to maintain a false peace that ultimately just erodes your own psychological well-being.
That makes a lot of sense. It's a painful but necessary filtering mechanism. But, we also have to look at the flip side of this equation.
Which is,
Well, it is incredibly comforting to sit back and say, oh, if someone is pulling away, it's just because they are intimidated by my
or
growth.
that definitely strokes the ego.
It really does. But what if the silent resentment isn't about their fragile insecurities? What if you were unintentionally sabotaging your own relationships through your own blind spots?
Ah, yes. This is where true emotional intelligence is tested. We really must be willing to rigorously examine our own unintended impact.
Right. Because it can't always be the other person's fault.
Exactly. And organizational psychology actually utilizes a framework for this called the Johari window. So imagine a window divided into 4 panes. One pane represents the open area. These are traits and behaviors that both you and everyone else are totally aware of.
Okay. Makes sense.
But another crucial pane is the blind area, and these are the specific habits you exhibit, the conversational tics you have that are just glaringly obvious to everyone around you, but you are completely oblivious to them.
And the statistics on that blind area are terrifying. The research shows that 95% of people believe they are highly self-aware, but when objectively tested, only about 10 to 15% actually are.
Yeah, that represents a massive society-wide self-awareness gap.
It's huge.
It means the vast majority of us are walking around exhibiting behaviors that alienate our peers, all while sincerely believing we are these empathetic, engaging communicators.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Because the sources didn't just point out that we have blind spots.
Right.
They categorized the exact unconscious habits that trigger silent resentment.
Yes, they did.
And the first one is brutal because it's so incredibly common. The conversation vampire.
An incredibly evocative and honestly accurate term.
It's the tendency to turn every single shared experience into a stealth competition. So, like, let's say a friend tells you they had a terrible morning because they got a flat tire. Instead of holding space for them, you immediately jump in with, oh, you think that's bad. My entire transmission fell out yesterday.
Right. People think they are bonding by showing they relate, but they're actually just hijacking the narrative.
Exactly.
And the underlying mechanism causing the resentment there is validation starvation. Humans possess a really profound neurological need to be heard and witnessed.
We just want to be seen.
Exactly. So when someone shares a vulnerability or a frustration and you immediately pivot the spotlight back to your own life, you are denying them that core psychological validation. You're implicitly signaling that their experience is subordinate to yours.
Wow.
And over time, that chronic lack of validation leads to deep emotional burnout of the people around you.
Okay, another massive blind spot is phubbing, phone snubbing.
Oh, yes. This is everywhere.
We see this constantly. You're out for coffee, having a seemingly good chat, but their eyes just keep darting down to the screen, lighting up on the table.
Well, the damage caused by phubbing goes far beyond simple etiquette. Prolonged eye contact is a foundational mammalian bonding mechanism.
Okay.
So when you break that visual connection mid-sentence to check a notification, you are basically severing a neural synchrony.
Yeah.
In fact, brain imaging shows that experiencing this kind of social dismissal actually activates the anterior cingulate cortex.
And what part of the brain is that?
It's the exact same region of the brain that processes physical pain.
Wait, really? Physical pain?
Yeah, so you aren't just being rude, you are repeatedly triggering a microdose of social rejection in the other person.
That completely explains why it feels so intensely personal when someone does that.
It really does.
And then we have a habit that is arguably even more insidious because it wears this mask of humility, the humble brag.
Oh, the humble brag, yes.
Whining about how exhausting it is to get promoted or complaining about the maintenance cost of a brand new sports car.
Right. The humble brag generates resentment because it creates cognitive dissonance for the listener. It fundamentally breaks the social contract of honesty.
How so?
While the speaker is attempting to extract two conflicting resources from the listener at the same time. They want the elevated status and admiration of the brag, but they also want the sympathetic coddling of a complaint.
Oh, that is so manipulative.
It is. And the human brain detects that manipulation instantly, and it just registers as deeply insecure and untrustworthy.
And we definitely can't ignore the impact of chronic negativity either.
No, that's a big one.
We looked at studies proving that emotional contagion is a literal biological phenomenon. Like, when someone constantly complains, it doesn't just annoy you, it actually spreads through your nervous system like a virus.
Yeah, because humans are hardwired with a negativity bias. From an evolutionary standpoint, paying attention to negative stimuli like, say, a predator, kept us alive much longer than paying attention to positive stimuli, like a beautiful sunset.
Right. Survival of the most anxious.
Exactly. And because our brains over-index negative information, the emotional toll of a chronic complainer is mathematically disproportionate. Sociological studies frequently cite a ratio. It takes approximately 5 positive interactions to repair the neurological drain of just one highly negative interaction.
5 to 1.
Yes. So if you are constantly venting without seeking solutions, you are putting your social circle in a perpetual state of emotional deficit.
So it's like thinking you're playing a friendly game of catch, but because of your blind spots, you're actually just throwing rocks at people's heads.
That is a very apt analogy.
You think you're connecting, but they are just wincing and trying to back away.
And that is the tragedy of these blind spots. It is vital to recognize that the conversation vampire, or the humble braggart, is rarely acting out of malice.
Right. They aren't trying to be awful.
No. These behaviors almost always stem from a profound underlying anxiety. They are maladaptive coping mechanisms born from a desperate desire to connect, to be seen, and to prove their value to the tribe.
Which is the silver lining here. If these behaviors are just anxious habits, we can rewire them. Like, we don't have to be stuck throwing rocks at people. But how do we bridge that gap?
How do you mean?
Well, we've established that you shouldn't be a people-pleasing doormat who shrinks to fit in, but you also need to make sure you aren't an unconscious conversational vampire. So how do you actually build genuine, resentment-free likability?
The solution lies in a really counterintuitive psychological concept known as the pratfall effect.
This completely changed how I view making mistakes. The classic experiment for this involved people listening to audio recordings of contestants answering trivia questions, right?
Yes, Elliot Aronson's foundational study. In some of those recordings, the person answering the questions brilliantly would suddenly knock over a cup of coffee, making this clumsy, embarrassed mess. And when the participants were later asked to rate the likability of the people on the tapes, the group that spilled the coffee consistently outranked the individuals who answered everything perfectly.
That is so wild. They gamed social capital specifically because they messed up.
Exactly. Because perfection triggers threat detection in others. It creates this unattractive air of invincibility that almost borders on the uncanny valley. It makes people wonder what you are hiding.
Nobody trusts perfect.
Right, so when you commit a minor pratfall, when you show a flaw, it humanizes you. Envy and admiration are closely linked emotions. Showing your humanity prevents admiration from curdling into toxic envy. It signals safety and draws people closer.
That tracks perfectly with the research showing that the strongest, most respected leaders are the ones quickest to admit when they are wrong.
Oh, absolutely.
Because people who refuse to admit mistakes are just exhausting to be around. Their rigidity proves that protecting their ego is more important than protecting the relationship. So simply saying, I was wrong about that, is essentially a verbal coffee spill. It instantly disarms the silent resentment.
Because it demonstrates vulnerability, which is the absolute cornerstone of trust. But vulnerability alone isn't enough, right? It must be paired with active engagement. And the research provides a remarkably straightforward, actionable fix for the validation starvation we discussed earlier.
Yes, the ultimate conversational supercharger. It sounds almost too simple. Ask follow-up questions. That is the entire secret.
It really is.
Instead of listening just to find an opening to drop your own related story, you consciously choose to dig one layer deeper into theirs. Like if a colleague says they had a stressful week, you bite your tongue on sharing your own stress, and you just ask what made it so rough.
But this raises an important question, however.
Okay, what's that?
If we are perpetually asking questions and focusing entirely on the other person to avoid being a conversation vampire, how do we prevent ourselves from becoming nothing more than an invisible sounding board? How do we balance active listening with the necessity of sharing our own authentic lives?
Right, because if nobody ever learns anything about me, that's just a different flavor of isolation.
Exactly. And this brings us back to equity theory. A healthy relationship cannot exist in a permanent deficit. It requires a reciprocal balance of give and take.
So it's a two-way street.
Always. You must share your own vulnerabilities, your own coffee spills, to provide the raw material for connection, while simultaneously validating the other person's reality through genuine curiosity.
So what does this all mean for you listening right now? If the goal isn't to be flawless, but also not to dump our emotional baggage on everyone we meet, where is the actual sweet spot?
I would say the sweet spot is grounded optimism paired with active curiosity. You acknowledge reality like. You don't toxically positive your way through bad days, but you consciously tilt your narrative toward possibility rather than dwelling in chronic complaint.
I like that.
And you ensure that in your daily interactions, your primary goal is making the other person feel witnessed and understood, rather than merely waiting for your turn to perform.
It fundamentally comes down to signaling respect. Respect for their time by putting your phone away, respect for their stories by asking follow-up questions, and, respecting yourself enough to say, I don't when a boundary is crossed.
Perfectly said.
Which brings us full circle to the hardest truth we opened with. Not everyone who smiles at you wants to see you win, and sometimes that silent resentment isn't something you can fix. Sometimes it is simply the unavoidable tax you pay for outgrowing the room.
But once you understand the psychological architecture behind that resentment, it really loses its ability to dictate your self-worth. You start observing people differently.
Yeah, it takes the sting out of it.
It does. You can detach from their projections and stop taking their internal status anxieties so personally.
You realize they are running an invisible race that has absolutely nothing to do with you. And at the same time, you take radical, empowering responsibility for your own side of the street.
Right.
You check your blind spots, you stop the humble bragging, you focus on the person in front of you, and you spill the coffee every once in a while.
It is a powerful dual approach, fortifying your internal boundaries against the insecurities of others, while simultaneously refining how you impact the world around you.
And that leads to one final thought we want you to take away from this deep dive today. We spend an agonizing amount of energy trying to micromanage how everyone perceives us. We tweak our tone of voice, we suppress our excitement about our wins, we over-explain our boundaries just to avoid the pain of being misunderstood.
It's exhausting.
It is. But spending your life managing other people's perceptions eventually teaches you how to shrink.
Which is the ultimate tragedy of lost potential.
So what if being secretly hated or misunderstood by the wrong people isn't a failure at all? What if it is actually the most efficient filter you could possibly ask for?
Let them misunderstand you.
Exactly. Let them misunderstand you. Let them hold on to their silent resentment. Because surviving that discomfort and refusing to abandon your authenticity to appease them might just be the required cost of entry to finding the rare people who actually want to understand the real you.